Hello and welcome back. This next video in this series on completing the school store activity deals with the inventory tab. So we've previously created all this beautiful sales information, we've created a menu system, and now we're on inventory and we're ready to get started. Now the inventory and later the balance system will need the same information that's in this first column in sales. So the quickest way to do that is simply to select it and copy it. This time I'm going to use Control C. You're welcome to copy as you see fit. And I'm going to go to inventory, and now I'm just going to paste it. Control V. And you can see that was pretty quick. Across the top you're going to type a series of labels for generally for different calculations. It's going to be a mix of information you have to put in and calculations, but there's kind of a lot of calculations in this sheet. So to save some time, I'm going to copy and paste it from another sheet. So I'll come up into cell B1 and just paste, and there you go. The directions list out what each of these labels should be, so I'm not going to take your time on the video to do that, but you just want to follow those directions and go straight across. I'm going to select these, and for right now I'm just going to shorten them up quite a bit actually, because I want to be able to see them all here. It's going to be easier if I can see what's written in there, so let me go to my sales sheet. I'm going to click on one of these label cells, something in row 1. I'm going to copy that formatting, and now I'm going to just drag that formatting over these things. Okay, and you can see that pretty quickly that straightened out my sheet. While I'm here, I'm going a little reverse order here, but since I'm almost done anyway, I'm going to select the block, the body of cells, and I'll put a border on it, and wow, I've got most of my formatting done already, or at least a good piece of it. Okay, now we're going to go through each one of these fields to figure out what we need to do. Now the first two fields you're going to make up. I mean, you could look them up on the internet and get an idea, but you can also just make them up. So I am going to say how many binders come in a case, and you know, if it's going to work for me, and case you can think of it like a box. You know, I'm a small school store. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get only 3 or 4 binders in a box. So I'm going to do wishful thinking and just type that in there. And now over here, I am going to type in what I believe the cost for the entire case is. So how much is it going to cost me to get this box of 3 binders? And I'm going to make up a number that seems reasonable to me. So I will just say $5.55. I'm buying wholesale. And I want to now do a check to see if that really makes sense. So I'll figure out my cost per item. And that's going to be a very simple formula. It's going to be equals the total cost for the case divided by, and notice a divided by sign in a spreadsheet is simply a forward slash. No, there's no division sign like you might have seen in 3rd or 4th grade math. It's that forward slash. And I'm going to click on the 3, because basically what I'm doing is I'm taking this number, I'm dividing it by 3 in the case, and that's going to say, it gets me $1.85. Fantastic. Now I want to fill in the cost per case and number per case information for the rest of the items. I happen to have gathered that earlier, so I'm just going to paste it in there. You're just going to make things up and do what's reasonable. And one way to check what's reasonable would be to take this formula from cost per item, drag it down, and you're going to see whether your costs are in line, whether you think they're reasonable for your store or not. Now notice that the number of decimals varies here. The cost per item is really a currency item, so I was going to come back later and format all this, but it's becoming a little difficult for me to read or understand with the extra decimals. So I can just click on currency and bang, it's fixed. Okay, if you wanted to, you can do the same for that currency. So you can do the formatting as you go, especially if not doing it kind of gets in your way mentally, or you can do it at the end. Okay, now markup. I'm just going to make this up, but how much am I going to increase the price of these things before I sell them so that I can make a profit or I can cover my other costs? Okay, now markup, I'm going to tell you that you should be between a 50% and a 200% markup. Now, I could type in 50 here, say I wanted that to be a 50% markup. The problem is when I eventually change this over to a percentage, that's going to be 5,000%, and that's a problem. So let me delete that. First thing I'll do is I'm going to select this entire column, and this is something formatting I do want to do before I enter data, and I'm going to change that to a percentage so it'll be easier for me to put in my information. As before, I've prepared this information in advance, so I just pasted it in there for you. So you can see that I'm going to mark this stuff up. I chose my lowest markup to be 75%, and I think my highest markup on pencils is 150%. They cost 5 cents a piece, so I figure I could raise the price a little on those. Okay, selling price. We're going to have to write a formula for this, and let's think about this. The selling price is going to have to be the amount it cost me per item right here. So I've got to get $100.85 back, certainly, because that's what I paid for it. Plus, I want to add in my markup, and my markup is a product of the cost and the percentage I mark it up. So let's look at that formula. I'm going to type this one out. I'm going to say equals, well, first thing, let's recover the cost of the item. So equals whatever in this cell, so in this case $1.85, plus a 75% markup on $1.85, so 75% of 185. Now, I could simply click D2 times the markup. Notice that the times, when you're doing a spreadsheet, the multiplication symbol is an asterisk. So don't go trying to put an X or anything in there. You need the asterisk. And I could hit enter, and that would work perfectly. And let's take a look why it would work perfectly. Basically, if we follow our mathematical order of operations, multiplication here is going to come before addition, even if addition precedes it from left to right. Okay, but if you have any doubts about that as you're doing more complex formulas, it is always okay to group what you want done first in parentheses. It was unnecessary here because multiplication trumps addition, and it's a simple formula. But as they get more complicated, you do want to use those parentheses because that's the highest level in the order of operations. Anything in parentheses is going to get done first. Okay, so as before, we just simply copy this down, and now I've got my selling price. Fantastic. Next thing I want to calculate is tax. And what I want to do in this case is I want to put in a tax rate in a separate place that's going to be used for these calculations. And the reason I'm going to do that is that if my tax rate were to change, I could change it in one place and it would update. So I don't need a whole column that says tax rate, because in New Jersey it's going to be 6.625. And in another state it's going to be something else. And it's pretty much going to be the same on most items unless there's an exception. Now, it brings up a good point. Our school store is a simple example of a store. There are some things in here that would be more complex in a real situation. But for our purposes, and even for running a store with younger students, it does enough without, I think, being overly confusing. If you have high school business students, you might want to have them develop this sheet in a more complex way, or at least talk about some of those issues with tax and where our numbers might be slightly off. Okay, so to figure the tax, I'm going to come down to cell N2, although it could be here, it could be here, it doesn't matter. I'm just doing this because I think it's a neat, orderly spot to put it. And I'm going to type in tax rate, and this formatting is most appropriate, so I'm just going to do that. Doesn't really need that much space. And in this cell, I'm going to throw a border on it to make it neat. And I'm going to put in the tax rate. Well, tax rate is a percentage, so let me set that to a percentage before I start so I don't have any issues. 6.625. Notice it rounded to 0.63. Now, it didn't really. If I click on there, it's 6.625, and that's what will be displayed. Okay, or that's what will be, I'm sorry. This will be displayed right now, but that's what's used in the calculation. So if I left it like this, I would be fine. But since it's kind of inaccurate and there's no real reason to have it rounded up like this, I'm simply going to increase the number of decimal points using this tool over here, decimal places, and then I can see an accurate tax. There may be other functions where I would do exactly the opposite, as I would remove those decimal places and use the rounded value because it just makes more sense. We're also going to look at the roundup function in the middle, which would actually, in that case, change the number. So it wouldn't just be the way it was displayed, but it would actually change the number in terms of calculations and everything else. Okay, so to find the tax rate formula is not too complex. It's basically going to be what you sell it for times the tax rate. So formula equals what I sell it for, asterisk, tax rate. Okay, so there's going to be I'm going to have to charge them 21 cents if I sell them one of these binders. Now you're going to notice a problem if I drag this formula down. The tax rate doesn't seem to work from cells from rows 3 on down, and let's take a look at why that is. Let's take a look at the formula. This formula references two cells, F2 and O2. When I drag it down, it wants to reference F3, which is correct, but also O3, which is empty. So this is going to get us into a concept known as absolute references. So basically, I want all of these formulas to point back to this exact cell. Okay, not to increment if I draw to the right or if I copy down. So in order to do that, what you would have to do with this O2 reference is you would have to get a dollar sign in front of the O. And that means that if I were to drag to the right, this formula, the O would stay the same. Now notice it did increment the G2, so I went, instead of selling price, I'm now putting tax on the tax, so that's not correct. But in this case, I definitely want to get that dollar sign in front of the 2. That means the row is not going to increment. So let's take a look at that. Now when I look at this cell, it's saying F3, which it should, but it's pointing back at O2. Now, is it necessary to have the dollar sign in front of both the O and the 2? In this case, it's not, because I don't anticipate dragging my formula to the right. So O would not naturally change. If I took the dollar sign off O and only made the absolute reference to the row number, not the column, no problem. There will be cases where you want to drag these formulas to the right, and then you're going to have to consider putting that dollar sign in front of the column as well as the row. Now let me put it back the way it was originally. A shortcut for putting these dollar signs in, I can go up there and I can type them like I did, but if you hit the F4 key on your keyboard, notice it puts in dollar signs for both the column and the row. If I hit it again, it changes it so it's only for the row. If I hit it again, it changes it only for the column. If I hit it again, it takes them away. So I could just hit it a couple of times, get exactly what I need, and then copy that down. Okay? So absolute references. It took a couple of minutes to talk about that, but they're important. Sometimes you've got to lock in a reference to either a row, a column, or both. Okay, that brings us to amount due. Amount due is a very simple formula. You're simply going to take your selling price, add your tax, and it costs $3.45 to buy one binder when we're collecting tax. Now, I'm going to point out, you may have already figured it out, but I'm going to point out the error in what I'm doing here. Generally what would have happened is, let's say if some student came in and bought 5 binders for their friends. We would have calculated the tax not on the single selling price, but on the total sales. So if it was 5 binders and 2 earbuds and 2 notebooks and whatever, the way we're charging it now may be slightly, and I mean slightly, may be slightly off. Because generally in practice what you do is you add up all your money, all your costs, and then you apply the tax. So be aware of that, and if a student brings it up, certainly discuss it. For our purposes, we're going to keep it simple and we're going to do it by item. Okay, next column is in stock, and basically you're going to make up these numbers. School store, I'm probably not going to keep too many things in stock, but I'm just going to make up some numbers. How many do I now have on the shelf, so I can make some intelligent decisions as to when to reorder. And as before, I'm just going to paste some information I already have in here. Okay, the next column is the average number per month. So my average sales per month. Well, I'm going to have to look to my sales information to get this. This is not something I can make up or generate by myself. And it brings us to the first time where we're going to be referencing information from another sheet. It's not difficult. I'm going to click in the cell, I'm going to put my equal sign in there, and I'm simply going to move to that sheet, and I'm going to select, in this case, average sales per month. And I'm going to hit enter, and it's simply going to bring that data from that sheet to this sheet. And because we have everything organized in the same order, when I drag down that formula, it's going to populate it correctly. So if I looked at single subject notebooks 7.5, and I went over to sales and I looked up single subject notebooks, you'll notice that is the average. So perfect. Okay, I have one issue with this, however. The issue that I have is that for ordering purposes, these decimals really don't mean much to me. 1.25, you know, I'd rather have a whole number, I think. Now, one way to get a whole number, of course, would be to reduce the number of decimals. Here's 3.75. So if I reduce the number of decimals, it even rounds up for me, so that's one solution. Sometimes that's not going to be enough. It's not going to be accurate enough for you. So I'm going to introduce a new function here. I'm going to click on the first cell, and it's basically just going to the sales sheet and getting cell M2. But what I want to do, let's do this. If I came after the equal sign and typed the word round and put this value in parentheses, and I could have started this way. I could have done round and then selected the value. I'll show you that in a second, and hit enter. It's going to round. So it's taking my $1.25 and it's making it into a dollar, which is the appropriate way to round it. But to err on the side of caution, I'd rather always have the next higher number when I order. I'd rather have 1 or 2 more things in stock than I need rather than run short. So let me go back to that formula, and a variant of the round function is simply, I'll just edit this, round up. No spaces, as if it's one word. And now when I hit enter, you can see it rounds up to 2. So let me look at that again. I'm going to delete it all together and see how I could have built that from scratch if I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I'll say equal round up, and I can choose it right there. Puts in the parenthesis for me, and then I'm going to go over to sales. I'm going to pick the appropriate value here. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm just going to copy down my formulas. Okay, nice. Now, last major thing we're going to do here is we're going to look at how we can populate these cells, vendor and free delivery options. So we want to know who we're buying binders from, which will go here, and how quickly we can get them, which will go here. But we want to do that from this menu where we've added in our data, added in our options. Okay. Now the other thing is here I want to be able to type the company name, or I want to be able to choose a company name, but I also want to be able to type a company name in the case that it's a new company. Okay, so I add a new item that I want to sell here and it's not on my menu, and I just want to type it in there quick. Now in actuality I would recommend that you just go back and you adjust your menu and you adjust your menu references, and then they would become available to you. But let's look at this option where it's possible that it's not in your menu and you want to be able to overwrite it. But for delivery options, I want to lock you out from that. So here we go. I'm going to click on the cell that I want the drop down to appear. I'm going to go to Data, Data Validation. Right now it's telling me that it's only applying to this cell, and that's fine because I can drag this down like I always do. There's some different criteria here. You want to leave it at list from arrange. This will create your list. Show a drop down in a list cell. That's exactly what we want, so we keep that checked. And now you've got these options to either reject input or show warning. Now because in the vendor field we want to leave the option of adding a vendor, even if they're not on the list, we're going to leave it at show warning. For the other field, for the free delivery options, we would choose reject input, which would not allow anything in that cell if it doesn't appear on the list. Okay, and then if you check this box, you can pop up a message if someone does not choose from the list. So let's try that here, and let's just say please choose from list if available. Okay, so we don't want someone typing what's already on that list. We just want them to choose it. But if it's not available, they're going to have to type it. Okay, the only other thing we really have to do here is we have to say where we're going to get the menu from. So if we click, it's going to say what data do I want. Click in that cell, and then just come select it. Now I don't want the word vendors. Or actually I could get the word vendors. Let's look at it two ways. If I just take these three and say OK, and say save, I'll come back to my inventory sheet, and look, there's a nice little drop down, and there are my three vendors. If I had chosen, let me make that a little wider. We have a lot of data in there. Okay, so there's the three. I can just come down here and check the vendor. Oh, got to drag this down. Let me undo that for a second. Just erase it. Okay. Now when I drag it down, we're going to get those same options available to all of these cells. And you'll notice that that's a little annoying, that message. I can choose whichever one I want for each item, or I can click in here and I can say Wally's Supply Store LLC. Okay, let me pick one more, and just for expediency I will copy those down. Okay, the last thing is to get these delivery options, and same type of process. Click on the cell, data validation. This time I'm going to say please reject the input, and I'm going to select from that other column. Come back to inventory, and you can see that those options are now available to me. Let me open it up a little bit. And this time if I try to type in one day, it doesn't allow me to do so. I have to choose. Okay, to finish up, I want to drag that down. I want to start choosing options, and I can, when I get to the next cell, I can type, and it'll give me the options there. So I could type 1W and week will come up, hit the down arrow and hit enter. Or if it's faster, I can just use this. So today, I'm just going to save some time here and drag them down and populate them all with today. Okay, last thing you want to do while you're finishing this up is you want to do your formatting. So you want to make sure that probably these cells, I would think, would be equal width. That makes it nice. You could make some of these with digits, some of these without currency a little bit wider or narrower. As a matter of fact, it's probably a good idea. Okay, set all your column widths. Make sure all of your formatting is nice and neat. Last thing you would do is here. This roundup gets me 2, but since I'm rounding up to the nearest whole number, the nearest integer, these decimals are really not necessary. So I'm going to just take those away. And could have applied that all at once, or I can apply the formatting that way. Okay, that's pretty much what you need to do on that inventory sheet. In our next video, we'll look at the balance sheet, which is what brings everything all together.